The second Nianyang tale. After a few years had passed, another incident involving Wu Sheng occurred. In Sichuan County, there was a scholar named Wu, with the courtesy name Anren. At the age of 30, he lost his wife and slept alone in an empty room. A scholar often came to converse with him, and they recognized each other as kindred spirits, bringing immense joy. The scholar's young servant, named Getu, got along well with Wu Sheng's servant, Bauer. It was only after a long time that they discovered Getu was a fox. Whenever Wu Sheng went on distant journeys, he would always take Getu along, sharing the same room. Yet others couldn't see him. Once, while staying in the capital city, Wu Sheng learned of Wang Sheng's misfortune caused by Nianyang. Thus, he cautioned his servants to be vigilant. The fox servant chuckled and said, "There's no need. This journey holds no unfavorable events." Upon reaching Zhuozhou, they encountered a person mounted on a horse outside a tobacco shop, dressed in luxurious fur attire. This person saw Wu Sheng passing by and also mounted his horse, following behind. Gradually, they engaged in conversation. The man introduced himself. "I am from Shandong, surnamed Huang, and hold the position of magistrate at the Ministry of Revenue. I'm heading east now and I am delighted to share the journey with you, so as not to feel lonely." Thus, both Wu Sheng and Huang settled in. Each time, they dined together and Huang consistently covered Wu Sheng's meal expenses. Wu Sheng outwardly expressed gratitude while secretly harboring suspicions. He discreetly asked the fox servant about it, and the fox servant simply replied, "Don't worry about it." This eased Wu Sheng's doubts. In the evening, they arrived at an inn and saw a handsome young man already seated inside. Huang entered and greeted the young man with a bow, asking cheerfully, "When did you leave the capital?" The young man replied, "Yesterday." Huang then invited him to stay with them. He introduced the young man to Wu Sheng, saying, "This is Shilong, my cousin and also a man of letters. He can engage you in discussions of poetry and literature, ensuring lively conversations throughout the night." Huang took out some silver, ordered food and drinks, and they all enjoyed together. Shilong was refined and elegant. With remarkable eloquence, both he and Wu Sheng grew fond of each other. While drinking, Shilong would often signal Wu Sheng with his eyes to cheat in their drinking games, punishing Huang and compelling him to drink from large cups, followed by uproarious applause. Wu Sheng became even more enamored with Shilong. Before long, Shilong and Huang discussed gambling and urged Wu Sheng to join. Each person contributed money from their pouches as a wager. The fox servant instructed Bauer to secretly lock the doors and advised Wu Sheng, "If you hear any commotion, just pretend to sleep and remain quiet." Wu Sheng agreed. During the dice games, Wu Sheng would lose with small bets and win with large ones. After several rounds, he calculated that he had won 200 taels of silver. Meanwhile, Shilong and Huang had emptied their money pouches. They discussed using Huang's horse as collateral. Suddenly, there was a forceful knocking at the door. Wu Sheng hastily got up, threw the dice into the fire, covered himself with a blanket, and pretended to be asleep. After a while, they heard the innkeeper struggling to find the key, breaking the lock and forcing the latch open. Several people entered aggressively, intending to apprehend the gamblers. Both Shilong and Huang denied any involvement. Astonishingly, one of them lifted Wu Sheng's blanket, pointing at him and accusing him of gambling. Wu Sheng loudly scolded him, as the men forcibly inspected his belongings, and it seemed he couldn't resist. They suddenly heard the distant call of a high-ranking official's entourage outside, announcing their passage. In a hurry, Wu Sheng rushed out, shouting, causing the group to panic. They forcibly pulled Wu Sheng back, begging him to remain silent. Wu Sheng calmly packed his belongings and handed them to the innkeeper. Once the official's procession had passed, the group left. Both Huang and Shilong displayed expressions of relief and surprise. They eventually found places to rest. Huang suggested that Shilong and Wu Sheng share a sleeping spot. Wu Sheng placed his money-filled pouch under his pillow and then got under the blanket. Not long after, Shilong uncovered Wu Sheng's blanket and entered his embrace. Whispering softly, admiring the honorable demeanor of elder brother, "I'm willing to form a bond with you." Although Wu Sheng knew of his scheme, He also saw this as a rare opportunity. They held each other close. Shilong engaged in fervent conversation with Wu Sheng, but he couldn't endure Wu Sheng's torment. He moaned and pleaded for mercy. Wu Sheng showed no mercy, continuing until Shilong's lower body bled. Only when morning arrived did Shilong appear exhausted and unable to get up. He claimed sudden illness, urging Wu Sheng and Huang to depart first. As they left, Wu Sheng gave Shilong silver for medical expenses. On the way, he told the fox servant about the previous night's official procession, revealing that it had all been a ruse orchestrated by the fox servant. On the way, Huang became even more attentive to please Wu Sheng. In the evening, they shared a room again. The room was small, with only enough space for a single bed. It was very warm and clean, but Wu Sheng found the bed too small. Huang said, "The bed is a bit narrow for 2 people, but if you sleep alone, it will be more spacious." "What's the problem?" After dinner, Huang left. Wu Sheng also wished to sleep alone, as he wanted to be with his fox companion. He waited for a while, but the fox servant didn't arrive. Suddenly, he heard a tapping sound on the small door in the wall. Wu Sheng unlatched the door and looked outside. A gorgeously dressed woman rushed in, closed the door behind her, and smiled at Wu Sheng, looking as beautiful as a fairy. Wu Sheng happily inquired about her identity, and she revealed that she was the innkeeper's daughter-in-law. They became affectionate, and he grew quite fond of her. Suddenly, tears welled up in the woman's eyes. Wu Sheng asked anxiously about her sadness, and she said, "I won't hide it from you. I was actually sent by the innkeeper to seduce you. Normally, when I seduce someone else, the innkeeper would catch me as soon as I enter the room. I don't understand why he hasn't come yet tonight." She continued, "I'm a virtuous woman, and I'm unwilling to do this. Now that I've fallen for you, I beg you to save me." Hearing this, Wu Sheng was extremely frightened, but he had no choice but to ask her to leave quickly. The woman just cried with her head down. Suddenly, he heard Huang and the innkeeper arguing and banging on the door, creating a commotion. He heard Huang saying, "I respected you throughout the journey, thinking you were a virtuous gentleman. How could you seduce my sister-in-law?" Wu Sheng grew even more scared and urged the woman to leave. At this point, there were also knocking sounds on the small door in the wall. Wu Sheng's heart raced, and he was drenched in sweat. The woman continued to sob. He then heard someone trying to reason with the innkeeper, but the innkeeper was persistent and kept pushing the door. The person trying to reason said, "May I ask what the innkeeper intends to do? Does he want to commit murder? We, the travelers, won't just stand by if violence ensues. If one of those 2 escapes, how can you prove their guilt? Do you want to settle this in court? Such matters of family misconduct only bring shame upon oneself. Moreover, you lodged in the traveler's room yourselves. It's clear this is a setup for fraud. How can you ensure the woman won't speak the truth?" The innkeeper was left speechless. Hearing these words, Wu Sheng secretly felt grateful and impressed, though he didn't know who the speaker was. At first, as the inn's doors were about to close, a scholar and his servant arrived to stay in the outer room. They brought fine wine and invited the fellow lodgers to share it, showing particular enthusiasm towards Huang and the innkeeper. When Huang and the innkeeper decided to bid farewell and leave, the scholar held onto their garments, desperately trying to stop them. Eventually, the scholar and his servant found a chance to slip away quietly and headed towards Wu Sheng's room with clubs in hand. Upon hearing the commotion, the scholar arrived to mediate. Peering out of the window, Wu Sheng was delighted to see that it was his fox servant, Guatu. He also noticed that the innkeeper's arrogance had been diminished significantly. Wu Sheng decided to play along and tried to intimidate the woman, saying, "Why are you silent?" The woman cried and confessed, "I hate myself for being inferior, forced into such disgraceful acts." Upon hearing this, the innkeeper turned pale. The scholar rebuked, "Your bestial behavior has been fully exposed." All the travelers here resented. Both Huang and the innkeeper put down their weapons, kneeling and asking for forgiveness. Wu Sheng came out and scolded loudly in anger. The scholar mediated, and a reconciliation was finally reached. The woman continued to cry and refused to return. Several elderly women and maids rushed out from the backyard and dragged her back inside. She lay on the ground, sobbing even more bitterly. The scholar suggested that the innkeeper should sell her to Wu Sheng at a high price, and the innkeeper, with lowered head, said, "I've been an innkeeper for 30 years, and today I'm facing such a situation with my own child. What else is there to say?" He followed the scholar's advice. However, Wu Sheng refused to pay a high price. The scholar mediated, and they agreed on a price of 50 taels of silver. After exchanging the money and the woman, the morning bell rang. Everyone hastily packed their belongings and set off with the woman. The woman had never ridden a horse before, and she was exhausted from the journey. They rested briefly around noon. Just as they were about to leave, Wu Sheng called for his servant Bauer but couldn't find him. The sun was already setting, and there was no sign of him. Feeling puzzled, Wu Sheng asked the fox servant. The fox servant said, "Don't worry, he will return on his own." Bauer arrived when the stars and moon were out. Wu Sheng asked him where he had been, and Bauer smiled and said, "Master, I used the 50 taels of silver to deal with that deceitful person. I felt deeply uncomfortable, so I discussed a plan with Guatu and went back to retrieve the money." He placed the silver on the table. Wu Sheng was astonished and asked for an explanation. It turned out that Guatu knew that the woman had only one brother who had been away for over a decade. He had transformed into the appearance of her brother and had Bauer impersonate her younger sibling, pretending to demand her from the innkeeper. Fearing trouble, the innkeeper had said the woman had died of illness. The two travelers threatened to report the incident to the authorities, and the innkeeper bribed them with increasing amounts of silver until they left with 40 taels. Bauer recounted the entire story in detail. Wu Sheng immediately gave him the silver. Upon returning home, Wu Sheng and the woman's relationship flourished, and their household grew richer. Upon further inquiry, Wu Sheng learned that the handsome youth, Shemu, from earlier was her husband, who was in fact Janmu. She wore a piece of luxurious brocade, saying it was obtained from a man surnamed Wang in Shandong. Their group had many members, and even the innkeeper was part of their scheme. Who could have guessed that Wu Sheng's encounter was with the very individuals that Prince Shen of Jiang Hu had been complaining about? Isn't this a truly joyful matter? As the ancients said, the writer is skilled in falling. It's indeed believable. The storyteller Wikshosh remarked, methods of harming others in the world are widespread. However, they are particularly severe along the north-south trade routes. Bandits who brandish weapons while riding fast horses to rob travelers of their belongings are well known. There are also those who cut open bags and puncture luggage in the city to steal possessions. By the time the traveler turns round, their money and goods are gone. Isn't this one of the most severe methods of harm? Then there are those who encounter strangers and speak sweet words like fine wine. They don't approach suddenly but rather get close in a friendly manner. Once a person mistakenly believes them to be good friends, they immediately suffer loss of wealth. These swindlers manipulate situations and set traps, constantly changing tactics, because they deceive people with their sweet words. This type is called by the public. Nowadays, there are quite a few of such people on the northern roads, and many have fallen victim to their schemes.
Alright, this story has come to an end. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you.